Hi guys, if you've just jumped over from my last video, which was about my experiences with fairies, you'll notice I am still here. I got so excited, I had to film this video straight away, but if you're new here and you were searching on how to see fairies, then welcome. It's very nice to have you here. My name is Zoe, and the purpose of this video is pretty simple. Actually, it's not, but straightforward in some ways. It's how to see fairies. We're going to go through different ways to see fairies. Now, I do want to say that these are not all of the ways that I know of. That I took a quick break, guys. I was like having my tea and some biscuits and things, and I started writing down like ways that I know of, or different methods and things, and oh my god, the list is long. So I talked about in my last video the possibility of me creating a course on fairies, and I think that's definitely gonna happen sometime. It's in the works because there's so much that I have to share and so much detail to it. I cannot relay all of it in this video, but I'm gonna do my best to cover the basics. That's why I'm going to call this How to See Fairies 101. So, if you are a person who wants to see fairies, if you've seen them already and you want to know more, if you are somebody who is very curious and doesn't believe at all, great, fine, hello, nice to meet you, nice to talk about fairies to everyone here. And basically, the number one thing I'm going to say, the first thing I'm going to say is you need to be open about this. So if you're the kind of person who's here out of curiosity, that's good. Curiosity is a gateway to many things. If you are here, though, to make fun of these things, you can just leave because I don't care. I don't say these things normally, oh my god, it's hard to do that. Okay, but if you are here to see fairies, then let's do it. Let's do it. So, number one, very, very simple. Ask for it to happen. A lot of us don't think about these things, but it is totally within your realm of ability to be able to ask for the things that you wish to have happen. And oftentimes, after you ask, you'll notice that things begin to start happening for real. The ball will start rolling. So you need to make it clear. Begin to ask. One way you can do this is just sit down somewhere, that you hold special, maybe your altar, maybe meditation space, maybe outside, and set the intention and ask aloud. Say, I would like to be able to see some of the spirits of nature, or whatever you call them. So some people say elementals, some say fairies, some say elves, different things like that. Just ask for it, basically. That goes a long way. Now, number two, if you've asked for it, you need to be open to receiving what you've asked for. And this is funny. I'm reminded actually of a story. It's quite a simple analogy. It's the story of a man, and he really wants to win the lottery, and he keeps saying, "Dear God, please let me win the lottery. Please let me win." And one day, God replies to this man and says, "Please, man, please buy a ticket for the lottery." Because, of course, if you want to win the lottery, you do have to buy the ticket. And it's the same with seeing fairies. If you want to see them, if you want to get to know them, you're going to have to be open and start really making the effort as well. So that means, it honestly means getting outside a lot more. Most of the fairies that I have seen have been outside, although I will say There are fairies that will reside in homes. If you didn't know that, that's kind of cool. Little fact. You might have a fairy in your home. Sometimes these are called brownies, these little house spirits. Sometimes they're unwanted, but I'm not going to really go into that today. There's so many folk tales that we could talk about fairies, and not all of them are pleasant, but I'm assuming you only want to meet the pleasant ones. So, like, I don't know. maybe you want to meet them all. But brownies are certainly around in your house, and also different folk tales talk about different ones. Like in Finland, when we were visiting Finland, the people there talked about this house spirit called the Tontu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Tontu lives in the house. It is this guardian of the house almost, and you can upset it or you can appease it and work with it. And oftentimes that is the case. Fairies can be both benevolent and malevolent in our eyes. They can be quite protective, actually, of their territory. And I think I understand where they're coming from after many, many, many years of humans entering into places that they shouldn't and doing things that they shouldn't to the environment and things. And it's the same with our houses. We should be reverent to those spirits that help us here. We should work with them. That means keeping things clean and being respectful of the space. So, as I was saying, you probably do want to get outside though. If you're going to start seeing fairies, a lot of them are going to be associated with plants and nature. Number 4, trust your intuition. So once you have, asked for it and you've been open to receiving it and you're going outside and, maybe you've made a special space inside in reverence to your house fairy, things like that. Once you've started doing these things, you've got the ball rolling, maybe something happens. Now, this is the point where you're going to have to trust your intuition, because a lot of people I know have expressed a kind of self-doubt. They'll tell me, it's funny, I get this a lot, where people will feel this need to tell me these stories, and it's like they're looking for a reciprocation of, yes or no, this is correct, this, thing that happened to you really did happen. It's like a verification. And I can't verify. I can say, wow, that's very similar to something that I've experienced or some such thing. But really, it's important that you trust yourself, because these things, if you are constantly doubting yourself, you can kind of overlook these things and never learn more into them. Say that something happens, whether or not it is associated with fairies, the point is to be curious enough to look further and find out more, because once you start digging, you are going to figure out, the details, and you will often. I've had people who have found complete proof of the things that they have experienced, and me as well. I've dug deeper and found some proofs later of what really did happen. So trust yourself, that's really important. It's also the same if you are getting these sense perceptions, and if you are aware and attuned to them, and you also trust them, as opposed to just discarding them. So say that you think you saw something, instead of instantly jumping to the societal rational conclusion of, oh, it must have just been me seeing something. If you've been asking to see fairies, you need to start thinking, perhaps this is more, and like I said, dig deeper. Now, I want to talk about ways of seeing. seeing, because not all sight is, within the eyes. Our sensory perception is how we perceive the world, obviously. So in this body, we interact and engage by using our senses, so sight, sound, touch, taste, all of that. And these are the ways we can know anything. And people talked about seeing as believing. Well, in the case of fairies, is somewhat true as well. If you want to have any perception of them, you're going to have to work through these senses in most cases. Because I'm going to say, there are dreams and things like that we can work with. But a lot of people, when they want to see fairies, they're going to think, I want to see fairies with my eyes, because that is very exciting. It's super exciting to be able to see them really in the physical world. And I did talk about, some of my stories where I got to see fairies with my physical eyes in this reality, but that doesn't always happen. And I want to explain that there's a kind of crossover. Sometimes I will see them in the physical. In those cases, I've talked to others as well who have seen them in the physical, but it will often be, it's somewhat blurred. Maybe it's lights in the corner of your vision. Maybe it's, shapes coming across, shadows, like very vague. There have been instances where you fully see them, and that's wonderful. But again, what often happens is there's that crossover between your eyes and your third eye, so you're able to understand more of what you're seeing by looking with the third eye as well. If you haven't learned about what that means, the third eye, I would look into it. It's beautiful to do these openings and activations that are online to do with awakening that sense that you have of something extra beyond your physical sight. You're not always going to see fairies. And I do believe, I was talking with a friend the other day, she said that everyone has the ability to be able to heighten all of their senses so that they can use all of them to be able to understand the world and beyond the world. I agree, but not everyone in the beginning is going to see things. Some people will find that they hear things. Some people will find you feel things. Your different senses can be heightened or lessened, of course. And those who hear things, you might not be seeing the fairies, but perhaps you're hearing little whispers of their presence. That same friend actually has been experiencing that just before she goes to sleep, in that lucid state between dreaming and waking. She's been hearing whisperings in her ear, and she knows that that's the fairies of her area. So that's quite special. And for those of you who feel things, perhaps you need to tune in as a matter of listening to your body and knowing, what are you feeling, how are you feeling, when, and if you really feel the presence of some of the plants around you, or you feel something's different about the area, kind of switch on and start to really go deep into your body, inhabit that, and explore it. Some people might actually find that it's easier to see these things in the dream state, because this world is still working through its ideas about fairies, let's say. And, whatever we've thought in the past, I know that things are not so open to, this reality at the moment, and the fairies themselves have kind of gone in hiding, I guess you could say. They're not making themselves as apparent to everyone these days. But in the dream state, it's definitely possible if you are someone who can lucid dream, or you are somebody who can remember their dreams, start, keeping a journal and keep setting that intention. Before you go to bed, set that intention. I want to meet with the fairies, see what happens. And the last one, really exciting, because this is for anyone. If you feel like, oh my God, but I'm not a person who can do this or who can do that, or, I assure you, you are. You will learn if you keep trying, if you keep looking into it. But until then, if you are somebody who is solidly in reality, but you still want to see fairies, this is for you. Because I have experienced a lot of fairy energies surrounding certain animals, and also plants and rocks and things, depending on the shape of the rock and things like that, but especially to do with animals and especially to do with insects. There's something about, you just get this feeling overcome you sometimes that there's a fairy around, you look around, and then there'll be a dragonfly or something like that, and they do have that special ability to morph themselves into various states. So they can actually come to you in the form of dragonflies, bees, butterflies, beetles, even things like that. So just being aware of it, And even those animals in folklore have often represented the fairy realms. So there's that crossover, the real animal representing the energy of the fairy. So they're offering the wisdom and the message to you when they come to you. If you have one light onto your hands, a light down, and you recognize that this is a moment of reflection, you can really be grateful for that wisdom and energy that animal is carrying. Look into it, Google it. It's always fun. So, just gonna check, because the fairies have been playing around with my camera and they keep pausing it. I don't know why. It's never done that before. They think this is funny, but I'm gonna check that it's still rolling. Okay, we're good. Ooh, right. Okay, so the last thing I want to say on that note is it can actually be really helpful if you keep a journal, simply because it's focusing your awareness. Your awareness is like a lens onto this reality. Whatever you're experiencing in life can be experienced in multiple different ways. And I mean, this is evident, you'll probably know what I mean. If you could have the same situation, and on a good day, it's a different experience. On a bad day, it's, a different experience in that. So whatever you're going through, if you want to focus that lens, you can actually gain something different out of what you're doing in your day-to-day life. It's a matter of being aware. So really start noticing what's going on. Notice, those times that your keys go missing and you're just, oh, I lost my keys. Well, start noticing that. Write it down. Notice when they come back and where. What's happening? There's always these little connections you can begin to make if you become more aware. And finally, I know I'm running through this really quickly, but there's these different ways in the folk tales of being able to see fairies traditionally, or even go to fairyland. And I wanted to share some of those because it's pretty special. It's like, this is the tried and true ways to do things back in the day. So number one is get lost. Get lost, right? Like, just go out and walk without intention of getting somewhere. That's a surefire way of coming across things you didn't expect. But in the folk tales, oftentimes when a person was becoming lost, it could be associated with a fairy is misleading them. Sometimes they can be mischievous like that. Or actually they get lost, and through that process of getting lost, they then stumble across fairyland. They've crossed into some different time. There's something about that mind space of not knowing where you are navigationally, and you're in space and time, that allows you almost as a corridor to jump into different realities. Very interesting, right? I'm gonna insert some of my past writings below if you want to learn more about these kind of things. I've written a little bit about it, so look below. Speaking of corridors, in between spaces are amazing places to see anything from other realms. I'm not just talking fairies. If you have ever experienced like creepy, spooky things in hallways, guess why? It's because it's that liminal space. It's between places. It's got that sense of, this reality, next reality, other dimension, veil. The veil is kind of broken in between those places. That's why you're often hearing about ghosts and things showing up in hallways. So if you want to work with between spaces, you can look into, obviously, hallways and things, but also between buildings, tiny. I found this to be true. It's really cool. Between buildings and tiny, overgrown allotments, often those places can be really magically charged. Speaking of that, fairy rings. Have you heard of this? If you haven't, look it up. It's really cool. A fairy ring can be a ring of mushrooms. It can be a ring of grass, which actually grows naturally. If you look that up scientifically, they can explain it. But there's still that association with the fairies. In the past, the fairy ring was an area where the fairies had danced around at night. Excuse me, I'm just going to need some tea. Lots of speaking today. The fairies would have danced around at night, and in the morning, the grass would have grown a lot quicker. That was the belief back then, or the mushrooms pop up. And I like that. If you want to enter into a fairy ring and you want to experience their energies, I would say do so carefully, with reverence, respect. Sit, maybe do some meditation, something like that. Or if you really want to go deep, fall asleep. I don't know if you have the time or the space or anything. Falling asleep in old stories, doing so in a fairy ring or on a fairy mound, because there's a lot of tales, especially in Ireland and places like that in the UK, where fairies are entering and exiting, this mound of earth. If you fall asleep upon one of these mounds, the fairies can almost take you, possibly physically or your astral body, into their fairyland. And whether you think that's Agartha, meaning inner earth, or you think that's the fairyland of old, I'm not going to be able to say it, Tirna something, oh my gosh, I can't remember, but or whether you think it's just a dream state, either way, it's pretty special. This is crazy. I'm just gonna wrap this up really quick because they did it again. My camera paused again. I don't know why it's doing that. I think it's their idea of a joke. Is it you? that's doing that. I'm just being silly. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I hope it's been helpful because I don't know if there's a lot out there. There probably is. But these are just my tips from my own experience and also what I've read from different histories and folk tales. I actually did, if you didn't know this, I did study history, got my degree in history, and one of my coolest classes, on a random side note, was actually one called Shakespeare and the Supernatural. Amazing. It was so much fun. We looked into the beliefs at that time of Shakespeare and also how he wrote about fairies and different beings in Midsummer Night's Dream and also Macbeth. I loved it. But I have read my fair share of stories, folk tales, different things, and also have experienced it myself. So this is all coming from my own wisdom. I have not looked online to see what people have said, and I hope that, it rings true. I hope it rings true, and that it can be helpful. So, if so, awesome. Thank you very, very much for watching this video, guys. Let's just take a moment and breathe. 3 deep breaths, coming back to our awareness, coming back home to ourselves. So, nice, perfect. Have a wonderful day. Go in peace.